I'm Polly Warren and welcome to the Positive Perimenopause podcast. This is the place for some positive inspiration to help you through the rollercoaster ride of perimenopause. I truly believe that with the right support, knowledge and wellness tools, you can feel your best yet, because I'm learning this life phase can be a truly exciting and often pivotal time of life. With every episode, my mission is to support and empower you to own your menopause, because it's time to start taking care of the most important person, and yes, that's you. So thank you for being here and sharing your time with me. Now let's dive in. Hello, how you doing? Welcome back to the podcast. I hope you've had a good week. Well, this week here in the UK has been so hot. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm a Brit. I'm going to do it. I'm going to talk about the weather. It's what we do. But we've had the most phenomenal weather. It's been so hot. And it just makes me so grateful that I live here down on the south coast in Brighton and Hove. It's been just amazing. I feel like I'm on holiday sometimes when the sun is out and I can go to the beach, go and have a dip in the sea, although it's still pretty cold in there, but it always does make you feel incredible. Okay, before I tell you about this week's episode, let me just remind you of last week's episode, which was with Dr. Maria Luque. Dr. Maria talks about how physical activity can affect your quality of life at menopause. So if you haven't had a listen to that, you can go back and have a listen. On to this week's episode, which I really, really enjoyed. This week, I speak to Dr. Sabina Brennan. Dr. Sabina Brennan is a psychologist, she's a neuroscientist, and she is host of the Super Brain podcast. Now, I don't know about you, but if you are in perimenopause, I imagine you have experienced brain fog at some stage, whether that is forgetting where you've put your keys, walking into a room, not knowing why you've walked in there, not being able to find the right word, I've called my children every other name under the sun apart from their own, having your glasses on top of your head all day, looking for them and not realizing they're on the top of your head. I kind of say this with a smile on my face, but actually brain fog can be really, really debilitating. It can also be incredibly embarrassing, and it can cause us to lose our confidence and to also just not be as productive in our days. It can really affect your work life. And I know for me, it can also really instill a fear of something much more serious, such as early-onset Alzheimer's or dementia, when in reality, it's most likely tied to the hormonal changes happening in your body. So I was so delighted to speak to Sabina because she knows about brains. She directed a dementia and brain health research program for 7 years at Trinity College Dublin, where she also led a large-scale research study examining the relationship between brain health, lifestyle, genomics, and dementia risk. Sabina is also a best-selling author, and her latest book, Beating Brain Fog, has lots of practical strategies to support and tune up your brain. So without further ado, please welcome the absolutely brilliant Dr. Sabina Brennan. I am absolutely delighted today to have Dr. Sabina Brennan onto the podcast today to talk all things brain fog. So welcome, Sabina. So wonderful to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Now, brain fog is obviously a big subject when it comes to perimenopause and menopause. And I myself know how debilitating it can be. So many stories of things I have done in the past which have been because of brain fog. And I know also of so many of my listeners, like women in my Facebook group who I've asked about brain fog, have just told me so many different stories, how they feel like they're going crazy. They're worried that they're getting early onset dementia, that they're just really worried that their brain is actually deciding to pack in on them. So I think a really good place to start would be for you to tell us all what exactly is brain fog, because brain fog is a symptom of menopause and perimenopause, but actually I know that it has its own variety of symptoms as well.
Yes, that's true. That's kind of a good way of putting it. Yeah, I'm so glad though that women and people in your Facebook group are actually talking about it and naming it brain fog, because actually it's one of the reasons that I wrote this book. Was because I felt that there was a lot of women at that particular age who were catastrophizing that they were getting dementia, because they're in that sort of sandwich generation, where they're looking after teens and kids, as well as kind of maybe looking after older parents who may have dementia. And so they're highly attuned to that as a possibility. And then they start experiencing these symptoms of brain fog, and then they catastrophize. Brain fog, to just start it off, is a general term that's used to describe a variety of symptoms. And the most common symptoms are issues with attention. Sustaining attention, being able to stay focused on something, to concentrate, or actually to be able to pay attention while tuning out the noise and the things that are going on around you. So there's lots of different types of attention, but attention is one of those things that is affected in brain fog. Memory is affected, and that kind of manifests in terms of forgetfulness, and that can be forgetting what you did, or forgetting what you were supposed to do, missing a meeting or even like a coffee date, but also issues with what we call your working memory, and that's quite a complex brain activity. It's the kind of thing that you've got to do if you were queuing in the supermarket, you realize you forgot your purse, but you've got a £20 note in your pocket, and you're kind of looking in your basket, adding up how much everything costs to see whether you can keep everything or just take something out so you can pay. So that's quite an intense activity, and that can be affected in brain fog. Learning how to do new things. I wish there was another word for learning, and there isn't really, because when we talk about learning, people tend to think about academic learning and learning in school, but every moment of every day involves learning in some shape, make, or form. Anything that your brain encounters that's new, your brain has to learn about it, even if it's opening the door into a new building or learning how to open, the new packaging for your face cream. That's learning, and that's affected in brain fog. And then there's kind of what we call processing speed. And basically, processing speed describes how long it takes you to take in information, make sense of it, i.e. process it, and then formulate a response. And that can really slow down in brain fog. It just takes you so long. I certainly experienced that with menopause, was that kind of going, what are they saying? It's really kind of, what? Oh yeah, now I get it. And it kind of just seems to take longer for the penny to actually drop. Language, everybody will be familiar with that word finding issue. But it's not just that word finding one. You may find that your language isn't as fluid or as rich as it ordinarily would be. Now, I get brain fog also as a consequence of severe migraine. So for me, writing can really be affected if I have bad brain fog. I really may as well, using the same word, write off the day, because my brain just won't work, in that I can't get the flow of language that I would like. What we call executive functions. So they're very important functions. Things like making decisions, assessing risk, planning, organizing things, and also inhibiting your behavior. So, and that really does show up. And I think a lot of listeners, if they're going through the menopause and feel like they've had a personality transplant, which I did, I certainly got a personality that had no sense of humor whatsoever and was very kind of irritable and quick to anger. And that's related to your executive functions. You're not able to inhibit responses that would be far better inhibited. Like you get angry a little quicker, or you'll say, God, why did you do that? Oh, you're always doing that. Whereas before menopause, you're able to go, oh, look, don't say anything. It's just not going to be worth it. But your brain just hasn't got the capacity to inhibit those. Spatial navigation is a fancy way of saying how we kind of get around the world. And so what you'd call in general terms, clumsiness is quite common symptom. And people are often surprised to learn that is a brain fog symptom. But, your brain is constantly assessing where you are in time and place so that you can navigate the world safely without bumping into things or without falling or tripping over. But also even, where you are in a room in location to something so you don't knock glasses over, that are on the table, that sort of thing. So clumsiness is quite common actually with brain fog, and I think related to hormones as the menopause is. And then this sort of general term of a loss of mental clarity, a fogginess, and a mental fatigue. And I kind of contribute to various international working groups or consortia, around these kind of issues, not just brain fog and menopause, but brain fog is associated with a lot of diseases and disorders, which we can talk about later. But I've kind of been calling for a distinction to be drawn between mental fatigue and physical fatigue, because they're two very different things. With physical fatigue, your body is very tired, but you can still think, if someone were to ask you, a question. But with mental fatigue, you actually really just can't function anymore. You literally are too tired to think. And also, once you have mental fatigue, your estimates of your ability, your physical capabilities actually are shortened. So you actually, when you're mentally fatigued, you think you will become physically fatigued sooner than you actually will. So when you're mentally fatigued, you sort of are inclined to feel more physically fatigued. So that's a bunch of symptoms that can have absolutely life-changing and devastating effects. Not everybody will experience all of those symptoms, but even experiencing one or two can feel like you've had a personality change. And I think that happens a lot of us going through perimenopause and menopause. There's a real sense that you've lost yourself.
Yeah.
Real sense. And when you think about it, in part we are our memories, in part we are. So for example, an example I often give, if you've always been a funny, quick-witted individual who's the first in with the one-liner or the smart comment, and your processing speed has slowed down because you've got menopause, or you're in perimenopause, you're going to look even to other people like you've had a personality change, because by the time you've processed the information and come up with the comment, the funny comment, the moment has passed.
Yeah.
And other people may even interpret that as you behaving differently in their company. And, we all have the tendency to think the world revolves around us. So they're going to think you've only changed because of something to do with them, and being forgetting that your husband told you or your partner told you, that he can't make the parent-teacher meeting next week, and then you have a stand-up row because he's not home in time for it, and all sorts of stuff.
I mean, I can say that I have experienced all of those things you have just mentioned, all of them a lot. There was one story which just popped up in my mind, which I had forgotten about, which on the back of what you just said. My husband, one day, this was when I was in the midst of my perimenopause, he was working. He told me, I'm going to be back home. It's our Christmas. It was his office Christmas party, and he was in London. We're in Brighton. And he told me that. I knew it. I think it was even in our wall calendar. But I had completely forgotten about it. And when the evening came, I was waiting for him, and I was waiting for him, put the kids to bed. And I suddenly, in my mind, just started to catastrophizing. I was thinking, why is he not here? He should be on the train. I couldn't get hold of him. I left messages. I ended up finding the numbers from all his work colleagues, leaving messages. Where is he? I'm really, really worried. Going mad, just going mad. Anyway, he eventually, at the end of his dinner or whatever it was, he looked at his phone for about 1 million missed calls from me, and he was like,
"Oh, he probably had a panic attack."
Yeah,
then.
exactly. What are you doing? Anyway, I was so embarrassed because I had contacted all of his work colleagues. I tried to find them on Facebook. I mean, honestly, the whole thing was just like, oh my God. So this is the thing. We go to these ridiculous lengths because of it. And, we're very quick, I think, a lot of us, to laugh it off. Oh, I've just put the keys in the fridge again, or I've forgotten that. Or, the spatial one, I had a real issue with, always falling over, bumping into things.
Yes.
But you can laugh it off. But sometimes actually it can be really embarrassing and it
Yeah,
can be really debilitating.
I think it's much more than laugh it off. I mean, laughter, is a way to cope with certain things. But I think, if there's one good thing that has come out of the pandemic, if ever, anything good was to come out of a tragedy like that, it is the fact that the spotlight has been shone on brain fog, because it is one of the most debilitating, long-lasting, persistent symptoms of long COVID, which affects both men and women. And that kind of tracks us back to if we come and talk about the other causes and factors that contribute to brain fog, many of them disproportionately affect women. And as we know, things that affect women often don't get, investigated scientifically, or treatments aren't as readily available for things that just affect women, as opposed to those things that predominantly affect males, etc. So, that's something that I'm positive about. And I think that's part of what we're seeing. I know menopause and perimenopause is starting to be talked about more often, but I think because of the pandemic, in a way, people are now actually able to talk about the brain fog thing as something realistic, because I think a lot of women were being gaslit when they would go to their GPs and talk about these symptoms, of brain fog, which are actually cognitive symptoms. But, we know for sure, again, gender differences in how doctors can treat men and women. And this is not something that the doctors consciously do, but it's an inherent bias. And they will, when a man presents with symptoms, they will immediately look for an organic cause. When a woman presents, they are more likely to look for a psychological cause. And so there's two issues there. One is that women come away feeling that they haven't been heard, and a psychological cause may well be playing a role. So my second issue is actually organic causes aren't as more important than psychological causes, because any sort of psychological factor has organic implications for how your body works. So there shouldn't be a hierarchy anyway between organic and psychological. So that's something we kind of need to, address ourselves. But one thing I wanted to say as well, just as you said that there, you've experienced all of those symptoms. The thing is that most people will have experienced some of those things, or even all of them, at some point in their life. That doesn't mean that most people have had brain fog. What it means is that, for example, if you've been jet lagged, you might feel mentally fatigued. Your attention and focus for the next day or two is off. But these are short term. The thing with brain fog is that the symptoms are persistent. They occur regularly, and they actually interfere with the quality of your life, your relationships, as I've described, and frequently your work, and a lot of women, I think, again, that same sort of, again, it's kind of a gender difference. Now, I have a husband and two sons. I absolutely, really like men. I don't mean to be going down on them, but that's a terrible choice of words. But, that the thing is, though, I think as women, rather than say anything about those difficulties, we'll work longer, or we'll take work home, or we'll try and compensate. And that's one of the changes I would like to see, is for brain fog to be recognized as an impairment that can impact on your work, and for compensations to be made. If you broke your leg, there would be compensations, or if you have a bad back, you'll get a better chair. So that's kind of taking that forward.
Yeah, actually, one of the women in my group who messaged about this when I asked them about today, if they had any questions, was exactly that. She was saying she was really struggling. She had been really struggling at work. She said actually since she's been taking HRT, it's improved. But how she was wondering, for other women, is there any sort of compensation, or is there anything out there which is in place for women if they are suffering from severe brain fog at work? But my gut reaction was probably not. I don't know if you know more.
Yeah, I think you recently had something where you were hoping for changes in menopause. I'm based in Ireland for anyone listening. So we're actually making real progress, that it has been highlighted as, an issue that has very specific, particular needs. Not that, any progress has, been made in terms of allowing accommodations as yet. But I believe that your government sort of turned down the proposals on the grounds that it would be unfair to men. Yes. Oh my God, what kind of laws have been unfair to women for centuries? And now unfair to men. I think men are just lucky they don't have to go through menopause. That's enough compensation.
Oh, I know.
It's absolute madness.
A very quick break to ask you to hit the follow or subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying this episode, I'd be super grateful if you could hit those stars and rate it too. Thank you.
Anyway, no, I'm not aware, but I do think that we should perhaps not be afraid to tell your, if you have a sympathetic manager or whatever, that you are having some symptoms as a consequence, some temporary symptoms as a consequence of perimenopause that you are working on. And we can kind of come to that. But in the interim, until such time as that kind of adjusts and you return to normal, could there be some sort of adjustment in the work? If you're having particular problems with a specific type of work, it doesn't mean you can't work. You could take on a different activity that perhaps less cognitively demanding, not affecting your thing. But, again, that would have to be at your discretion, your manager's discretion, and only you know whether that would impact negatively on you in the long term. It absolutely shouldn't. But, we're talking about a real world here. Before we go to the next question, I do want to just point out as well that brain fog is not a disorder, it's not a disease, and it's not a diagnosis in and of itself. But that doesn't mean it's not real. It really is a symptom that something is amiss because your brain is technically malfunctioning. It's not performing as it should do. And a nice little analogy that I like to use, I think it works well. If your listeners think it don't, please tell them to contact me. But I think it makes it easier to understand. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes you can have experience, issues with fatigue or whatever that you can pinpoint to something, jet lag or working too many hours or, something like that. Or anyway, if you have a cough along with a cold, you can say, well, I have a cough because I have a cold or I've had a sore throat or whatever. But if that cough persists for a long period after the cold has gone, it's a sign that something is amiss because you shouldn't be coughing. Now, if you go to your doctor with that prolonged, persistent cough that is now, like brain fog, interfering with the quality of your life, interfering with your ability to do your job. For example, I wouldn't be able to do this podcast with you if I had a persistent cough, etc. So if you went to your doctor, they'd take a history to examine the possible causes of that cough, and they would probably take your blood tests, etc. And they'd be trying to determine whether perhaps you've developed asthma, whether maybe it's an allergy to something you've started to use that happened at the same time as you got the cold. It could even be, I'm going to attempt to pronounce this, gastroesophageal reflux disease. You know that word? I really struggle with that word. It could be a post-nasal drip. So when you're sleeping at night, there's a drip and that's causing irritation and causing you to wake up and cough during the day. It could be, a chronic bronchitis. It could be so many things. It even could be something related to your heart. But the point being, it is a sign that something is amiss and you need to investigate and get to the roots of what is going on. And the thing is, with brain fog, and around brain fog associated with perimenopause and menopause, my feeling is that the hormonal changes associated with menopause are a tipping point wherein you start to really experience brain fog, because you may well have other factors that are known to contribute to brain fog, but your brain has been coping. Then the hormonal changes come in and suddenly your brain can't cope anymore and you have brain fog. And therein lies the solution, because you can start dealing with some of the other, other factors.
That was going to be my next question. How does perimenopause, hormonal changes affect brain fog? Is it at perimenopause when we experience more of these brain fog symptoms? Is it purely because of those hormonal changes, or is there a lot of other factors at play? So you've kind of just answered that.
Yeah, I think it's worth talking about what those other potential factors are, because I think some of your listeners may actually start ticking some of these off and realize that there's multiple factors. So brain fog can be a symptom of an underlying health condition. Now, you may be aware that you have the health condition or you may not, but brain fog is really commonly associated with autoimmune diseases, which disproportionately affect women. It's very specifically associated with lupus, with Sjogren's, which I have. So I'm an example of that. It's also associated with migraine. So brain fog is associated with migraine and with Sjogren's, which I have of both. And then you throw my perimenopause into the mix, and I have terrible brain fog. It's also associated with inflammatory diseases, with neurological diseases. Migraine I mentioned as a neurological one. Multiple sclerosis, it's very common with multiple sclerosis. In fact, with multiple sclerosis, it's generally the main reason people have to give up their jobs is the brain fog, rather than a physical disability, which most people with MS are actually worried about. It's also associated with chronic pain, so things like fibromyalgia, and a lot of these conditions have their own name for brain fog. I use brain fog as an umbrella term. So you may have heard people talking about fibrofog. So they're talking about brain fog as a consequence of their fibromyalgia. But lots of chronic conditions, depression, anxiety, type 2 diabetes. Brain fog is very, very common with type 2 diabetes, and even also with some cancers. And then it's also quite common after serious viral infection. So I have not been surprised that, brain fog is a lasting symptom following COVID. And in fact, I did an episode of my own podcast way back in the summer of 2020 about it, and about how, and I wrote a piece for our Irish Times, about it, that we need to focus on this, not just at that point, it was just to focus on how many people were dying. I was kind of, which is really important, but, there was other huge factors being mixed out on. So they're sort of the medical conditions that can contribute to it. And you don't get to the age of perimenopause and menopause without having maybe something else, most people will have something. It then, of course, unfortunately, can be a side effect of some of the medications used to treat those conditions. So you have the double whammy of that. But also what a lot of people aren't aware of. So you might have heard of chemo brain. So that's, brain fog is a side effect of chemotherapy. But also a lot of over-the-counter medications can have the side effect of impacting on your brain performance and cause brain fog. So if you take antihistamines, anti-nausea medication, or just normal pain medications, analgesics, they can bring about a side effect of brain fog. So you can look into that. Now, I always say to people, if you have been prescribed a medication, never, ever, ever stop taking it without speaking to your prescribing doctor or consultant. But do speak to them if you think that they are contributing to your brain fog, because there may well be an alternative that won't have that side effect. And you may find that that's actually the biggie, We then have the hormonal imbalance and fluctuations, which I'll come back to because I want to talk about that in a bit more detail. But I'll touch on the other factors, nutritional or a dietary deficiency. So vitamin B12, an iron deficiency, a folate deficiency, and even an omega-3 deficiency can lead to brain fog. I want to say before I go any further, this does not mean you go out and buy vitamin B12 tablets or iron tablets or omega-3 supplements. As we get older, we can become deficient in vitamin B12. Our gut doesn't absorb it as well as it used to, but that's something for your doctor to diagnose. Really, for the vitamin B12, the iron deficiency, the folate deficiency, that's for your doctor to diagnose and to prescribe. With regard to omega-3 deficiency, that's about your diet, get it in from your oily fish. And then the lifestyle factors that contribute to brain fog, and they have contribute a good proportion to brain fog. And I think that they are things that affect perimenopausal women because of the stage of their lives and because of how we've set up Western society. So poor sleep, poorly managed chronic stress, lack of exercise, and a lack of mental stimulation, they can all actually bring about brain fog. So kind of going back to the hormonal. So basically hormonal imbalance or hormonal fluctuations can actually impact on your brain performance. And it's not just at menopause. It can happen with PMS. I used to know my period was due because I would start to get clumsy, drop things, trip over things. During pregnancy and also post-pregnancy, that baby brain thing, I mean, it does change your brain. And it's kind of hard to talk about these hormonal things without, because I'm of a generation where we took umbrage when people said, oh, it's her hormones, but the fact of the matter is, our brain uses hormones to communicate, and they do actually impact on how well our brain functions. So it is just a reality. It is a fact of life that happens, and taking that on board can be empowering for you, and then deal with people who are rude about it in another way. So yes, menopause, but also things like thyroid dysfunction, and type 2 diabetes is a hormonal, it's the hormone insulin that comes out. Interesting, say, with thyroid dysfunction is that if you have hyper or hypo, you will have different brain fog symptoms.
Okay.
It affects the brain kind of differently. But when we go back to the hormonal ones, basically, I think what people don't realize is that you have estrogen receptors all over your brain. So they are involved in activities that are not just around reproduction and, feeding babies or having sex, those kind of things, or being of a particular sex. So when your estrogen changes dramatically at perimenopause and menopause, you have receptors in the parts of your brain. You have estrogen receptors in your hippocampus, which is involved in learning and memory. You have estrogen receptors in the crinkly part of your brain, your cerebral cortex, and that's involved in thinking, the executive functions, the learning, all those kind of things. So changes in those are going to bring about changes, or have the potential to bring about changes in your cognitive functioning. So, and then if you look at progesterone changes, indirectly, they can impact on brain fog by disrupting your sleep.
Yeah.
So for me, I think the best way, around this is obviously trying to manage your hormones as best you can, but also really, really looking at the other factors that contribute. And if you can address those factors, you may find that your brain actually can cope with the changes, the fluctuations in the hormones associated with menopause, which is why I kind of like to try to say to people, it's very temporary, something that you can change or minimize.
Yeah, which is good to know, because I think a lot of people think, oh my gosh, is this what it's going to be like forevermore as I get older? But yes, it's not, is it? It's very, very temporary.
Yeah. And I mean, you even have estrogen receptors in your amygdala, which is the part of the brain that's involved in, the fear response and in anxiety and those kind of things. And so you can kind of see how all of these things kind of can impact on how your brain works.
So then, Sabina, what can people do? What can we do to improve our brain fog if we've got it at perimenopause, during perimenopause? And then I suppose the next question is, what can we then do just to really keep looking after our brain as we age, so that we can really look after it and keep it working for us in the way that
keep it healthy.
Keep it healthy. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, one of the primary things I would say is to prioritize sleep. I mean, it really is critical. When you go to bed, when you go to sleep, rather, your brain has a job of work to do. It has lots of stuff to do. And, essentially, when you take in information during the day, there's a tiny part of your brain called the hippocampus that sort of acts like a temporary repository for that information until you go asleep at night. But it has very limited capacity. So by the end of the day, a normal day, if you don't have brain fog and you've been working and doing a lot of stuff, your brain will just feel tired. You'll kind of go, God, I can't take any more in. And you need sleep, because at nighttime, basically the information that your hippocampus has taken in during the daytime is then filtered. So your brain communicates via electrical and chemical signals. And we see when you go asleep in the early part of the night, when you've more non-REM sleep, non-dream sleep, we see activity between your hippocampus, which you really would have to turn your brain upside down to see, and it's kind of right deep in the middle of it. We see electrical activity between the hippocampus and your frontal lobes. So they're the part of your brain that's involved in decision making, and they're really well connected part of your brain. They kind of have the big picture information. And basically, we think that this is a filtering of the information, sort of saying, discard, 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 forget that, you don't need that. Oh, there's one we need to keep, because you can't remember everything. You can't keep everything, all the information you take in. So basically then a little later in the night, we see much more diffuse activity across various areas of the brain. And that is the new memories, the new information. It's the start of the sort of memory making process. It's the new information starting to be consolidated across networks in your brain. So a lot of people think about memory as a storage thing, but there's no place that they go. It's stored, and stored is kind of the wrong word, but it's stored in patterns of neural activity, so you see this, neural activity. Then really interesting, in the latest part of the night, which really is early morning, that's when you have the most REM sleep, the most dream sleep. What actually happens then is that the new information is interlinked with existing memories, knowledge, and experience. And that's kind of why you have those funky dreams sometimes where there's, something that happened today mixed in with something mad from your past or your childhood or whatever. And the thing is, if you miss any of those stages of sleep, you won't be able to function properly the next day. So if you haven't had enough sleep, your hippocampus hasn't been able to clear out everything, you're going to wake still feeling full and groggy and, oh my God, I can't take in any new information. I'm still sort of mentally exhausted. You either won't remember the information that you took in the next day because it didn't get a chance, or you won't be, how would I put it? So you will have trouble learning new information and concentrating. But also, one of the benefits of good sleep is that you can let your unconscious brain do a lot of the work for you. Your brain loves to make connections. It loves to identify patterns. And that's something it can do while you're asleep. So, rather than say, if you're really struggling and falling behind on something and you're trying to figure out the solution to a problem, give your brain all the information that it needs, put the work away, relax, rest, do something that is restorative, and then have a good night's sleep. And let your brain work away on it. And you may wake up the next morning with the solution because your brain is actually doing it. Sometimes we give too much credit to our conscious part of the brain. We're actively trying to do stuff, when actually we have a subconscious or unconscious part of the brain that actually has access to all of the information.
Yes.
And you can kind of let it do the job. So prioritizing sleep is critical for, good, clear. It should really help with, the ability to take in information and feeling less tired and remembering things. Of course, with menopause,
I know it's so hard.
Is disrupted. So, there would be simple things I would say around that is, routine and regularity are absolutely critical for good sleep. If you have, and I lived through this and I know how horrible it is, I think hot flash is like just a misnomer. I felt like I was going to keel over every time. And so much from, what was it that I always thought, sort of from the neck up. I mean, the rivers used to run down the backs
Oh,
of my knees,
I know.
everything.
It's horrible. We do have a
Dripping.
couple of episodes about sleep, and so if anyone is really struggling with sleep and going, "Oh my God, but I just can't get to sleep," that we have got some
Yeah,
episodes
yeah.
because
Have some a change of clothes beside you,
yeah,
and avoid managing your exposure to light. I don't know if have people
yeah,
spoken about that in the previous
yeah,
episodes.
yes,
And temperature, have they
yes.
spoken about that?
Keep
That
it
your body
cool,
needs. Yeah, the
cool.
room should be cool. Yeah, it should be cool, not warm for
Yeah,
overheating. Right. So managing stress is really, really critical, because stress poorly. So there's nothing wrong with stress. Okay. You need stress to achieve your goals and to get joy out of life, because, anything worth doing involves a little bit of a challenge or a little bit of novelty, and they all come with, wakening up the stress response. So, stress per se in and of itself is not a bad thing. It becomes chronic, it becomes problematic when it becomes poorly managed and chronic. And that can be something that can characterize us around that stage of life.
yeah. Well, you're managing everything. You might
Yeah,
have aging
and
parents,
that's,
kids,
yeah,
the whole lot. So
yeah,
yes, but so
kids,
that's why it's more important than ever to actually take charge of it.
to actually take charge of it, because it actually changes the physical structure of your brain and also how your brain functions. And that's really because, so the key to a healthy brain is neuroplasticity. And that's growing as many connections in your brain as you possibly can. A well-connected brain is a healthy brain. And you get to grow new connections in your brain anytime you learn something new. So that's really, really important. And the more healthy brain you have, the better able you are to cope with challenge, like, yeah, not just sort of your body being challenged by hormones, but the challenges of juggling your life. But also a challenge like a disease like dementia. If you were unfortunate enough to get dementia, it's in the early stages of the disease. It's not about how much brain pathology you have in your brain. It's actually about how much healthy brain you have to cope with that pathology. And that's what makes the difference between two individuals, both of whom can have the disease in their brain, and only one of them has the symptoms. We're drawing a distinction now between Alzheimer's disease and Alzheimer's dementia.
That's so interesting. So was that Alzheimer's? Because my mother has Alzheimer's, so I'm
Okay.
particularly interested. And it was when she got diagnosed, it gave me the fear because I was thinking, my goodness, does that mean I'm more likely to have Alzheimer's? So I mean, is that a thing or?
So my mum had dementia. My mum had to make mixed dementia. I actually gave a talk on Monday here down in Cork City, actually around this topic. My first book, if anyone is interested as well, my first book is actually it's called 100 Days to a Younger Brain, and it is actually all about brain health and how to minimize your risk of developing dementia in later life. Right. So I want to be very clear: dementia and brain fog are two absolutely different things. Dementia is a neurodegenerative disease. Brain fog is not a disease. It is a symptom that something is amiss, that you kind of, many of the factors are things that you can do something about. And generally speaking, it is temporary. So with regard to the risk factors for Alzheimer's disease, we know that 40% of all cases of dementia could potentially be prevented if we could eradicate 12 modifiable risk factors. So age is your biggest risk factor. Can't really do something about. You asked me about genetics. There is a small genetic element, but it is minimal compared to the risk associated with the lifestyle factors.
Okay. So we've talked so far then about sleep and about stress. I mean, Sabina, as you're saying all this, what is really positive about all of this is that these are all the things that we talk about all the time, about factors which everybody can be doing anyway to help reduce any sort of menopause symptoms and really increase their chances of a really long and healthy and happy life. So it's nothing new, which is great.
Yeah, it's not rocket science, but I think
Yeah,
it helps to understand
absolutely.
what's going on. And I think it's important just to mention diet as well,
Definitely.
because your brain, a diet and exercise, you may not feel like exercising, but your brain is dependent on you to make sure that your cardiovascular system is healthy, because it depends on that to get the oxygen and nutrients that it needs to function. So if your brain's not getting enough oxygen, it can't function properly. And in fact, brain cells will die. And then if it's not getting the nutrients it needs, it's not going to function properly. And very succinctly, the best evidence is for a Mediterranean diet. And again, we know this around so many other factors. Lots of colorful fruit and vegetables, oily fish, and get your nuts, pulses, and get your fat from olive oil. And honestly, that's the best diet for a healthy brain.
It's amazing when you think about the brain, because the brain is the one organ in our body which controls everything, doesn't it? So everything we are doing, really, we should be thinking about, how is this affecting my brain? Because without it, we haven't got anything.
People go out for dinner and they look at the menu and they're asking things like, is there gluten in it? Is there sugar in that? Did you ever look at a menu and say, is this going to be good for my brain?
Yeah.
You don't. I start my talks generally by saying, hands up if you brushed your teeth this morning, and keep your hands up if you're going to brush them again this evening, and then keep your hands up if you consciously did something for your brain health today. So all the hands go up for the dental health and they all come back down for the brain health. And that's really crazy.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, your
Totally
dental health is
crazy.
important, but you need your brain for everything.
I would love to ask you, Sabina, I know we haven't got much time left, but one thing I would love to ask you about is how you came to be doing this work. Because I did read in the front, I have got your book, Beating Brain Fog, which I really recommend everyone to get, and we'll put all the details in the show notes, that you came to doing all this quite late in your life. And I think that's so inspirational for so many midlife women to hear about.
Oh yeah, I didn't go to university till I was 42.
I know, I
So
love that.
yeah. So yeah, I think I was coping with yeah, probably doing a PhD and being perimenopause. But I hadn't gone to university at all. I left school at 16 and I had a whole other two different careers. And yeah, I went to university to study psychology. While I was in my final year studying psychology, I got a scholarship to do a PhD in the Institute of Neuroscience, where I actually studied how the brain changes with age, basically, and I did electrophysiology, so looking at the electrical activity in the brain, etc. Well, what I would say to anyone listening is, not wanting to add on what you might consider extra stress in your life, but I think it's really important that if you say have hankered after studying and you're afraid that it's too late or that you're not smart enough or, all the kids will be brighter, that most definitely was not my experience. You cannot underestimate the value of having lived a life, raised children, sorted out mortgage, problem solved. To be honest, doing a degree is, if you pick a subject that you love, is an absolute doddle compared to any of those things. And to be honest, you have, particularly with a subject like psychology, you have much more life experience to actually understand what the topic is about. So I really wouldn't be afraid about it. I was afraid about it. I was terrified that the younger students would put me to absolute shame. But I worked harder than they did and I was more interested in my subject, and that makes life an awful lot easier. And in fact, we know from neuroscience that if you are, studying or reading about something that you have a natural curiosity for, neuroplasticity is enhanced in the brain. So actually it is easier to learn, so that would kind of be key. And also don't write yourself off as like your life is over. I mean, I've just been writing in my next book. I think there was a section where I wrote that actually when I turned 30, I think I thought I was past it. And really, to be honest, I will put my hands up and say, perimenopause, going through that was horrific for me. I really did not have a nice time. It wasn't really spoken about like it is now. It's very recent that people are talking openly about it. But I have to say, with support, take whatever support you can get, do whatever you can to manage your brain fog, ask for other people to help out, what you're going through. But I will say, oh my God, the life on the other side. You know what? It's so much better than your 20s or your 30s. It really is. You know who you are, and therefore then you have a much better handle on what you want for life. And my argument would be, go for it. It is never too late. You spend most of your life raising your kids, paying mortgages. When you get kind of to that menopause or just past that menopause stage, that's the one where you grab life by the short and curlies and just go for it.
Oh, yes. This is what this podcast is all about. I absolutely love it. It's so, we're not past it. There is so much more to life. And I love that idea of I'd love to go back and do a psychology degree. I mean, I think we do the university at the wrong stage of our lives.
I agree totally.
I had no interest in my degree. Yep. I did do a degree, but I had no interest in it. Whereas now I've got so many things I would love to do and go and learn.
And it becomes real learning, real education rather than this point ticking exercise so that you can move to the next thing. It really is. I loved every minute of my undergrad degree. I mean, I had loads of the books read before the term started because they were fascinating.
Yeah.
And the others didn't even, the other students, that the degree was wasted on a lot of them. And I won't say all of them, but on a lot of them, because they're like coming over to me, oh, what's the top key points that I need to know? I never read that book, and you kind of go, oh, it's such a waste.
Yes, it is. My final question, Sabina, which I ask all my guests, because this is called the Positive Perimenopause Podcast, and I like to give the listeners just one practical, actionable takeaway which they can put into action today. Is there something that you could suggest for them?
Yes, absolutely. I didn't know this question was coming. I would say you need to schedule time into your day, every day, to have fun, to smile, to laugh, to do something that is enjoyable and just for you. Smiling lowers your blood pressure, it boosts your immune function, it releases feel-good hormones that make you feel good, really help with brain fog. And as I said earlier, managing stress is critical. And my key tip for managing stress is to laugh as often and as long as you can, because it actually is nature's natural stress buster, because it lowers cortisol levels. So I suggest that people should keep a laughter stash. If you work on your laptop, we all have things that without fail make us laugh, whether it's laughing baby videos, whether it's people falling over, whether it's a funny podcast or a particular comedian. Keep a file on your laptop or your phone or wherever is handy for you. And the minute you feel anxiety rising, don't wait till you get stressed. The minute you feel that anxiety rising, open one of those things, listen to it, laugh. It'll reduce that cortisol and just give you back some perspective.
Yeah, thank you. I love that. And I was reading in your book, your tips on smiling, which I absolutely loved. Smile when you wake up, smile when you just before you go to bed, and
smile when you pee. Just
yes.
yeah. Just pick. I actually have a new I don't know what you call it, product out. It is called Brain Gym, and it's 40 workouts in a box. And you basically it's like those kind of angel cards, those kind of things, but you pick a card a day just randomly, and it gives you a little tip of something that you can do that's good for your brain, plus the science behind why it works.
What a great present that is.
Yeah, it's a brain gym in a box.
Yes, brilliant. Right. So where can everyone find you, Sabina, if they want to get their hands on one of those, on their brain gym, your books? I would really recommend people going and having a look at Beating Brain Fog. It's got lots of useful, really practical.
It also has, it allows you personalize, you can go in and take quizzes and allow you identify which aspects. And it also has, I've been talking about the general lifestyle tips. There's an entire chapter in that book about actual strategies that you can do to help you cope with specific difficulties you're having. Today, we've just touched on the overall lifestyle factors, but the book goes into detail about very specific things that you can do to kind of manage any symptoms that you're having while you have them. People can find all my books and the Brain Gym, etc., on any online bookstore, Amazon, the usual. I think they should be in, certainly I know the Brain Gym is in Waterstones, I think in the shops. They should also be in bookshops. If they want to find me, I have lots of free resources online as well. So if they want to find me, they can go to superbrain.ie. That's the name of my podcast. So there's loads of episodes on my podcast where I talk to really interesting individuals, inspiring individuals about surviving and thriving in life. And some of those are really, amazing. A lot of women, actually, but there's some really inspiring men in there too. So that's how they can find me. And they can find me on Instagram at Sabina Brennan, and on Twitter at Sabina_Brennan, I think.
Thank you so much. I really love talking to you. I'm definitely going to have to get you back. I'd love to talk more about the actual brain health and Alzheimer's and dementia and stuff, maybe another time. And
absolutely.
I've loved your energy. I've loved your enthusiasm. It's really infectious. And obviously your immense knowledge on this subject. So thank you so much for coming along today.
Thank you for having me.
As always, I will put all of Sabina's links into the show notes. Here are the highlights. Number 1, brain fog, although it is a symptom of something else, including perimenopause and menopause, has its own set of symptoms, which are problems with attention, with memory, with learning new things, processing speed, problems with language and executive function. So that's things like making decisions, assessing risks, planning and organising, and inhibiting behaviours. Maybe problems with being extra clumsy, loss of mental clarity, and mental fatigue. Number 2, there's a real sense that you've lost yourself at perimenopause and menopause, and a lot of that is down to brain fog. Number 3, the symptoms of brain fog are persistent. They occur regularly and they interfere with the quality of your life, relationships, and your work. Number 4, brain fog isn't a disorder. It's not a disease and it's not a diagnosis in and of itself, but that doesn't mean it's not real. Your brain is not functioning as it should do and is a sign that something is amiss. Number 5, nutritional deficiencies, poor sleep, stress, lack of exercise, and lack of mental stimulation can all bring about brain fog too. The hormonal changes associated with perimenopause and menopause can often be a tipping point because you may well have other factors that are known to contribute to brain fog, but your brain has been coping. Then the hormonal changes come in and your brain can't cope anymore. Number 7, the solution is to manage your hormones as best you can, but also address the other factors that can contribute to brain fog so that your brain can actually cope with the hormonal fluctuations. Number 8, prioritizing sleep, managing stress, diet and lifestyle are critical for good brain health. Number 9, dementia and brain fog are two very different things. Dementia is a disease, whereas brain fog is temporary. Number 10, smile when you wake up, smile when you go to bed, and smile when you pee. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode and got something from it. Remember, if you have enjoyed it and you want to share it with a friend, a family member, remember these episodes can be really helpful for the men in your life as well as the female friends. Then do share it. And if you want to share it on Instagram, tag me in. I'd love to see that. And if you have enjoyed this episode, please feel free to write me a review. It helps so much get this podcast out there. And thank you so much to those of you who have already written a review. You can also rate and subscribe as well. Right, I think that is everything for today. Thanks again for listening. Have a wonderful week. Remember, you are absolutely totally awesome, and I know that you are doing the best you can. Take loads and loads of care. Lots of love. Bye.